So trying to read up on the IETF list. Does anyone should everyone know what RFP is? Because I'm now at the RFPs and contracts side of the IETF administration.
Yes.
And that acronym is like never expanded anywhere, but there's further links that also do not expand the acronym.
Yeah, so I think the answer to your question is yes. So generally, if you have to do anything with contracts in English language, then you will be familiar with the term RFP.
Ah, okay. So, okay. Request for,
proposal. Yeah, and then after an RFP, you might get an RFQ, request for quotation.
Yeah, that does ring a bell. Okay.
But yes, occasionally it helps to remember, to remind people that we are an international organization. And some of us still speak some other languages.
As usual, let's just wait until 4 past. Even though you all three are in the notes already, this is a useful link. Hello, Michael.
Okay, I should have come to Vancouver. We're starting to have board game nights now.
It might well be a one-off in the absence of a proper social event.
Yeah, but why does it have to be a one-off?
Not saying so. I just suspect that.
Well, I don't play games at all, so I'm not qualifying. But I think a lot of people were very, very interested in this kind of social event. So maybe there should be a repeat.
Okay, being 4 past, let's get started. Hi and welcome everyone. This is the last interim meeting of the co-working group before IETF 120. This is Marco, my co-chairs are Carsten Bormann and Jaime Jimenez. And this is an official IETF meeting, so the not well applies. It's about IPR and patents, and you have to disclose your knowledge on that if you are aware of that and participate in technical discussion, or you may otherwise refrain from participating in the discussion altogether. And even more important, this is about our code of conduct, so please be nice and professional with each other. And the agenda for today is mostly about one item, progressing the hands-on work on the core document driven by issues and PRs on the GitHub repo. And we have Carsten driving this with slides and a few PRs merged or not yet to discuss. I'm not seeing any other item added last minute. I think we can really jump into core. Will it take slide control, Carsten? Okay.
Okay, so you should now all see the slides. It's only 5 slides. I hope this will be mostly discussion and very little slide presentation. So we said we were going to work on one issue each in average on the corrections and clarifications document. Well, we are a little bit behind schedule, so we took on 4 of them. I think we have essentially done 2 of them and maybe need additional discussion on 2 more of them. I've listed them here, not quite in the numerical order, but in the order I want to talk about those. So the issue number 7 was an observation about the meaning of trailing slashes in URIs. And that is currently well defined, but it does make sense to add some clarifying text and examples. And thanks to Achim for pointing out the lack of examples. What PR32 did was provide a formal edition. So this is text that eventually will have consensus of the working group. It's not entirely clear how we do this, but at least the PR is merged after some discussion. I think the only question that we could still discuss is, do we actually have enough examples at this point? So we have one example with no trailing slash and 1 trailing slash. We have one example with 1, 2, and 3 trailing slashes, and we have one example that actually has a non-empty path component before having 0, 1 trailing slashes. And I'm wondering whether we need any other examples.
Would it make
Christian, go
sense?
ahead.
Would it make sense to have at least one example where there's also the question mark in there, just to make sure that the content that context is clear, especially maybe the not having a slash and then a question mark.
Okay.
Yeah, I will recheck these 2, and I had in mind those 3 corner cases I mentioned last time. I don't know which were covered by this merging, but I'll check again.
Okay. Great, but definitely having something after the trailing slash, the question mark, or also a fragment identifier might be useful. Okay, so took note of that. The next.
Sorry, I mixed up my mute button. It might make sense, I think, to swap around the authority/foo with authority// because the latter is the like regular case that people will expect and should handle, and multiple slashes are something where I think that while clients should handle that properly, it's perfectly reasonable for a server to say, yeah, like I don't deal out those URIs, so all of them are invalid. And maybe even state something about that is like that a server has no is not required to do this. I don't know whether that fits in there.
Yeah, I've taken a note of that. So let's go forward to issue 8 and back to PR 31. That is an old issue that essentially was handled via an errata report, because an errata report can have the necessary impact on IANA. And here in this case, IANA actually updated the text in the registry, and we have the errata report as something that attaches to the text in the document. So we are kind of done. What the PR just did was pointing to this errata report. And one question I put up was, do we want to copy the additional notes in the errata report over to this document? And the answers I have heard so far are no. So unless these notes need to be exposed in a better way or need some editorial work on them, I think we are done. We're really done with issue number 8. Okay. Next, issue number 10. Hello. The term request URI is not defined in the document, and PR 33 provides a formal addition, so text that is intended to go into the document. And that is merged because the first round of looking at this text has been done. And I think we need to spend a little bit more effort on checking whether the addition is correct. And another question is, what about the relation between target URI and base URI as defined in section 8 of 7252? So 7252 has a question about, has a section about multicast requests. And these, of course, have a base URI for responses that is different from what actually was sent in the request. I think this is adequately explained in section 8, so I don't think we have a lack of explanation there. But of course, the text in section 8 again assumes that we already understand what the original request URI was. So maybe we need to check this and make the relation a little bit more explicit. And what makes this a little bit more difficult to do than it should be is that actually the HTTP specification, which we mostly are trying to emulate here, has gone through different terms over time. So 7230 had a request URI in 9110. This is called the target URI. And of course, at the time when we did 7252, we couldn't know that this would happen to HTTP. So we are still using the request URI term. And one question is, do we want to copy, emulate what the RFC 9110 work did, or do we just continue to use request UI? And we still have to do the work on relating that to the base UI. So HTTP doesn't have the section 8 work because HTTP cannot do multicast, so they don't need to do that kind of mapping. So there's a limit to which we can copy HTTP here. Any positions on this?
None without having good suggestions for terms, and I don't have any there.
Yeah, so I was expecting that we wouldn't make much progress in the meeting on this, but we just note this as something that still needs work, even though the PR has been merged, the issue is not yet closed. And we probably should look at HTTP and look at how request UI and base UI relate to each other and add some text that explains how and why this is different from each other. Good. Then let's go to the last issue on the list. The issue that I have termed match boxing. It also could be called how do you keep your observed relationships alive while something changes below you. And right now we have some pretty good understanding of what the current state is, what does the document say, and we generally seem to think this is well defined, at least for 7252 and DTLS. So there is some clarifying text in PR34 that has been merged. But that's not the whole picture, because the specific scenario that is discussed in 7252 is the DTLS scenario, the DTLS 1.2 scenario, the unextended DTLS 1.2 scenario, I probably should say. And the opportunity we have here, sometimes people see opportunities as bugs because we haven't taken the opportunity, but that's not a bug, that's just a unfulfilled opportunity. The opportunity here is that this well-defined status actually is undesirable because it causes state to go away without any actual need for the state going away. And there are 3 approaches listed in the current text. One is to actually explicitly address the opportunity in new documents, for instance, kudos. 1A, to actually write up how existing extensions could use this opportunity. So 9146 is the connection identifier, and the connection identifier for DTLS 1.2, and of course there's also a connection identifier for DTLS 1.3, and we could write up how this connection identifier can be or must be used for continuing beyond the DTLS epoch. So this might be another set of clarifications. I'm not sure we are in a well-defined enough state for that, or it might just be additional specifications. And then, of course, number 2 on this list comes into effect. If using the opportunity as a change, then we may have to require some negotiation. So both sides of the communication know whether state survives such an underlying change event or not. And so, for instance, DTLS is able to have connections survive a change in IP address. And that's, of course, something we probably also want to look at for OSCORE. So can I continue to use my OSCORE context after a change of IP address? And things like that probably need to be negotiated because they are not being done today. And so one side doesn't know whether the other side is doing this, and one side also doesn't know whether the other side actually would work if they are doing this. So this is why we need negotiation here. And Marco, maybe you can say something about PR36.
Kirsten, one comment to raise from Achim Kraus. I think it was a comment on GitHub issue. He suggested to consider also the connection IDs introduced in DTLS 1.2 as an extension, and I think they are natively part of DTLS 1.3 instead.
Yeah, that's why this slide lists 9146, but this is the connection ID for
okay.
DTLS 1.2. But of course, the 1.3 case also needs to be addressed. And right now, the text that we have in 7.2.5.2 may actually be very undesirable because the functionality is there, and the text essentially says we are not using it. And yeah, that's the point about existing documents that actually make this opportunity rather easy to use, but we haven't said that we actually do.
Thanks.
So is there anything you want to say about PR36?
That's the next one, right? Do you have another slide for it, or
No.
Well, yeah, I can say something. I had some discussion with Kirsten yesterday on closing the original 34 or merging it to make it simpler to create a new follow-up PR, now 36, right on the main branch. Following the discussion we had 2 weeks ago at the interim meeting, this was about revisiting the initial part on the OSCORE and related universe, and to cover in 3 different parts what this means when you use OSCORE and when you use kudos for updating the key material of OSCORE, and what it means when you use group OSCORE instead. And there are different aspects that in a similar way come back for all the 3 different cases. And one is the surviving of observations in case essentially the security context is changed, and how it is delicate to handle in the correct way the protection of responses if those are protected with a security context different than the one used to protect the request. And chronologically, we first noticed these things all in group OSCORE when working on that, and then with the work on kudos, we sort of brought up the same fixes or updates, also in the interest of OSCORE. So the PR is about that, and it's intended to discuss the matchboxing for OSCORE with kudos or group OSCORE. Please review. Karsten already gave some comments.
Yeah, I said that I have a problem with the terminology has no impact on, because that would mean that the existing text has a well-defined meaning for this situation, and I don't think so. So we have to be a little bit more explicit than just saying has no impact on.
Okay, at least I think not in terms of token and message ID, because OSCORE, group OSCORE are agnostic of that, basically.
Yeah, Marco, you know what you think the existing status is. I don't know what I think the existing status is. So having no impact is not something I can properly review. So we really have to clarify this.
Okay.
So this right now, this is kind of a trapdoor spec. If you already know what it says, then you can agree with
Yeah.
it. But if you don't, it's not quite clear what it says.
So would it help to start with saying that that information is not an input to the OSCOR processing, for example?
That information.
Well, token values and message ID values, they are used as usual, as I understand, for the message coupling and matching, but they don't play a role in the OSCOR processing.
Okay, yeah, that's certainly something that needs to be said. And I think it would help to have a little bit of text also on why the security properties continue to work.
In stating that they are not part of the OSCOR processing, it might also be helpful to consider that OSCOR can be securely used across proxies, and that the tokens and message ID values, if they exist on both legs in the first place, will change in the course of that without any impact on.
Thanks, good point. Yeah, I was also thinking they are not taken into account, for example, when building the external AAD data structure for the message processing, which is effectively the cryptographic binding between a request and the corresponding responses. That doesn't consider message ID and token, so it's a different level of matchboxing, entirely in the control of OSCOR and separated. And in the same spirit, you can update the key material and the security context without touching the token involved, especially in a long exchange. So I see a separation of domains.
But that is the more hairy part, right? I mean,
Yeah.
regular OSCOR didn't allow that, and if you do that, you have to be careful.
Yes, exactly. So that's why in Kudos we introduced that confirmation that both peers have to give each other to confirm they know what they're doing and safely preserve the observations, while Group OSCOR instead builds on the group manager as the centralized manager of identifiers of nodes in this case.
Yeah, so coming back to what Carson said about negotiation, in Kudos we have that kind of negotiation. So both peers know exactly what they support and want to do with regards to preserving observations.
Right, and in Group OSCOR we have the unilateral negotiation that comes from the group manager saying how it is.
Right, yeah.
So would it help to elaborate more on all these points?
Yes.
Yeah, but fundamentally, if I have to pick one, is those values don't take part in any of the OSCOR related or security processing.
Yes, so you have your own way of linking a response to a request.
Right.
I mean, in a sense, I guess the only way they take part is that in some situations you end up retrieving the security context use based on the token.
So would that be an attack vector?
Unlikely, I think, because if you end up not finding the token or finding the wrong token, the message processing would fail.
So there's enough entropy in the security context that an attacker cannot create two security contexts that might be confused in interesting ways with each other.
It should really not be possible because they should end up having unique master secret and meaning unique sender and recipient keys. Unless you configure things very strangely on your device to have the same master secret for multiple contexts and master secret.
Even then, you must own for each master secret and each master sort. There must all the sender IDs must be unique. That's a very hard requirement for Oscore.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I think that's some text that should be in the document. So my next question would be, is there enough that I will get before the next cutoff that it makes sense to do a -05 for the meeting?
Yeah, I need to think what exactly to write and where, because we were discussing points specific of Oscore, I think, more than Kudos. And I think those points are applicable as is for group of score.
Right, but again, I think this needs to be clarified.
Yeah.
One curious question for the general understanding. You mentioned in the context of DTLS, which now has the ability that connections can switch addresses, that do you think that Oscore cannot do that? Because as far as I understand, for Oscore, the client's address can change at any time, and possibly the server address can, subject to the usual client still has to find them problems. They just can't change during an observation because then the underlying transport's observation gets cut. Other than that, I think I don't remember any requirements from Oscore that say that they are bound to some specific transport or transport addresses.
Yeah, but does that mean that every implementation will ignore the incoming transport address, the incoming sender's transport address, and find the security context instead? Is that something we require implementations to do?
You should find it based on the key identifier in the Oscar option. I think that would be what Oscar C states.
So if there are KIDs that are reused on a single server, then those may need the KID context to be provided, and Oscore is a bit wobbly on when to send that. But I haven't seen the KID context in practical use a lot.
Yeah.
You can use it to disambiguate.
So after all, Oscore is an extension of CoAP. So if the underlying CoAP layer doesn't give you the data, then you cannot look for the security context.
True.
What do you mean? The underlying co-op implementation doesn't have to give you anything because you look at the KID.
It has to give you the co-op message.
Not going to give them the message in the first place.
How would you kind of so the response needs to come from on all the transports that we have, the response has to come from where the request was sent. That is still kind of OSCORE doesn't alter that.
Right. So that's maybe one observation we also should record.
Yeah, OSCORE in itself doesn't use the 5-tuple, basically.
No, OSCORE puts data into the request response model, and the request response model may or may not have a 5-tuple or a token or any other identifying criteria other than the client will know that the response came back with that particular request. It was like an internal identifier, file handler, whatever.
Right. So everything we do below OSCORE to handle changes in the transport address are transparent to OSCORE, but they need to work enough so OSCORE actually gets the data.
Thanks,
Yeah.
correct. And a server receiving a request requires exact hints and be pointed to the security context to use for decryption. A client receiving a response wants to use the same context used to protect the request corresponding to the just received response, and the binding between the two is enforced by means of the custom approach of OSCORE, the external EAD. And that abstracts away from underlying details that the transport has to worry about, but not OSCORE in itself.
Yep.
You may actually change transport altogether across proxies that may act as cross proxies, and still all is fine for the endpoints that may not even know about any change happening on the way.
Or you might even so as long as you are not doing something where the co-op mechanism that you're using says, hey, this has to come from the same address, you might even switch addresses as a parent to the server between two requests. In Onion OSCORE, we made explicit precautions to say that for some contexts you may not want to look them up by KID, but you may want to require that they are coming from some underlying context, and then the KID.
I think we already have a security and privacy consideration in this respect in the OSCORE capable proxies document that you suggested, Christian, on the server side.
Sorry, say again, please. I was writing and didn't.
You had a similar comment in the past for the OSCORE capable proxies document, in the interest of the origin server, and we added a security and privacy consideration on the server that should do additional check before just run and decrypt the request.
Yeah, right. That is where that full statement is now, and I think Onion Osco just references that. Like, see there for how to do it.
Yeah, otherwise, a malevolent client that has a separate score association with that server can try to provoke that server to reveal itself and its network position, even though via trial and error, while the intention of that server will be to remain hidden behind the reverse proxy.
Yes.
Yeah, at some point we may reach the situation where we say, oh, this really needs to be a separate document. But let's collect the points in the core CLA document for now, and see whether we can keep at least some of the information simple enough that it can stay in here.
On the topic of splitting, does it help to have a separate section or subsection about the Oscar universe, actually?
Yes.
It starts getting a bit big.
Yeah. So there is a subsection, I think, right now on this matchboxing, and it really makes sense to have some initial considerations that apply to everything, or at least the most basic situation, and then have a subsection that does DTLS and a subsection that does OSCOR.
Okay.
And we probably also should have a brief mention of CORB over TCP as well.
Speaking of CORB over TCP, multipath TCP could get us similar topics as DTLS, because that too can switch addresses basically mid-CORB.
Yeah, which in TCP means you need a new TCP connection.
There is a new TCP connection being established, but the application that uses multipath TCP will not really notice, will not have, or let me phrase it differently, there is no unique new connection through which the request then comes from.
Right. So we would need to use some form of connection identifier abstraction that MPTCP provides.
I don't even think we have to deal in those identifiers. It's just that the expression, the peer's IP address that we occasionally use, for example, for the implicit URI host, is not as unique as we think. That doesn't mean that we can't use the MPTCP connection identifier. It just means we need to be a bit more careful about assuming that something is unique that may not be.
Yep. Okay, so I think the best thing that could happen here is that we get a few PRs that have text that may be overlapping, maybe contradicting itself, but we can merge that and then continue processing this. It is much better if we have attention on all the items we have to look at, than not having attention on those aspects we haven't solved yet.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
But Carsten, do you prefer to merge 36 as is, or do you prefer me to add some text already?
I think it would benefit from at least clarifying the term no
Okay.
impact. But if you think it's natural to add more text to this, we can then later restructure this. But as I
No.
said, it's much better to have the text in place.
So I'll keep building on this then.
I think so.
Then the section restructuring can wait.
Yes.
I'll leave it as is about that. Okay.
We could do the section restructuring between the cutoff and the meeting.
Yeah. But I think as new points that are also part of the clarification we touched, the actual OSCOR-based mapping between request and response, and the awareness that OSCOR needs to have or doesn't need to have of anything underneath, and the hints or guidance that a message recipient is expecting to know what to do. And in all this, those two values, token and message ID, fundamentally play a role. So I can try to clarify around these lines.
Yeah. And you can introduce a section on the subsection on OSCOR. That's not a problem.
Okay.
We don't have to have a finished product at any specific point in time before we actually finish it.
Sounds good.
Great. So everybody knows what they have to do?
I think I know, for one.
Yeah, I think it's really great that this issue has uncovered a lot of things that are really hard to find for new users of the protocol. So I think we are doing something very useful here. So I'm quite happy with this, even if we don't have all issues done by the end of the year or something. I think we are learning a lot, and we should write this up.
It may require a few iteration, and initially I may miss some things that are maybe super clear implicit to me, but it's worth spelling out.
Yeah, that's the old problem about eliciting tested knowledge.
Yeah. Okay, but this is one PR still on that issue 9. Did you plan to have follow-up PRs on any other issue? Yeah, some of the previous ones.
Well, on 9, definitely there will be more than one PR over time.
Yeah.
On 10, definitely we will need PRs. We don't even have a PR that actually addresses the base UI thing. On 8, I think we are done. And on 7, I also think we are done modulo the additional examples that Christian mentioned. So that might have another PR.
Right. You also had a few minor comments on the PR I created yesterday. I tried to reply.
Okay.
Are you okay with the responses?
I haven't looked at them. I will do.
Okay.
So are we done for today?
Looks like so, unless there's any other point that anyone wants to discuss. Heard none, seen none anywhere. And this is again the last meeting before IETF 120, where we got 2 hours for now confirmed in the European late afternoon evening of Wednesday 24. Okay, if there's no other comments, thanks for this discussion. I believe this will be a recurring working item for the next months. And thanks, Christian and Ricard, for taking notes. Much appreciated. Talk to you soon.
One very short AOB on what we talked about earlier in regarding IETF infrastructure and IPv6. The internet is making I found this on Mastodon now, and yes, the internet is making fun of us.
Yeah, please fill in the notes.
Yeah. Was this thing something IETF released, some document or something that people found amusing?
Okay.
IPv6 on the rim. Yeah, if they don't, who will, yeah.
Thanks for the pointers. Okay, thanks a lot again. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Good.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.